So that was the call of Buffalo Tyler Bass missing the last field goal that would have tied the game against the Chiefs, and it was wide right. As Giant fans, we all know what wide right means in history, and they would not let us forget that even on the telecast, as they kept saying, "Oh, wide right, wide right." Very happy about that, Romo.
I mean, the Bills just invent ways to just crush your soul if you're a fan. I mean,
I-
time and time again, these guys.
This team, I don't know what to think of this team. I mean, it's not, they're good enough to go places. They just can't get over that hump, and they do it in the most heart-wrenching ways. I mean, the Bills have lost so many games in so many different ways that they're now repeating. Hey, let's lose on a missed field goal again, wide right. I mean, they're like going back to the beginning and figuring out how to lose again. Say they've run out of ideas.
I thought the Giants had just heartbreaking losses, and seeing some of the Bills ones, the Music City Miracle, just things that have happened.
The 13-second one.
The 13 seconds.
It has to be the worst.
So we are the Three Angry Giant fans. Your host Scott, Giant Mike, and Jets fan Novak. Cardone is AWOL. He's a little under the weather tonight. And I think he's thrown the towel in on the season. I think he said the Giants are going nowhere. The Jets did nothing. Philly and Dallas are already out. Peace out, boys.
Yeah, I believe that's what's happening here. I believe Cardone checked out about week 11, actually, and it's just been like a shell. That's the way he described himself. Just a shell. Just an empty shell waiting for W's, man. Poor guy.
He got sick of watching this NFL this past weekend because I'm sure we'll get into it, but there are a lot of reasons to just hate what we saw over the weekend.
Oh, there are a ton of pet peeves that came out of that. I mean, we'll go through those before we actually get to our pet peeves. But before we start breaking down the games and going through everything, let's give a shout out. So we're going down south, deep south on this one.
Nice.
Hello, Gadsden, Alabama. Population 103,931. And Gadsden is known for riverboat traffic and supplies that would get to well-known companies like Goodyear Tire and Republic Steel via the riverboat. So maybe Riverboat Ron plays into this a little bit here. It was named Gadsden in honor of Colonel James Gadsden of South Carolina. And it's also the home of Cadillac Williams and former Giants coach Freddie Kitchens, who was also with the Browns.
Freddie Kitchens, that was the Browns guy, right?
He was the Browns guy.
Nut job, yeah.
And then he came over and was coach under Joe Judge for a season or half a season, maybe.
Yeah, for a minute.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a player in the NFL named Gadsden? Yeah,
Gadsden? I think he played for the Dolphins.
Yeah, Dolphins. Yeah.
And his I think his son plays for Syracuse right now, Rondé Gadsden.
Cadillac Williams, the guy that was always on the verge of a breakout.
Oh, Cadillac. Right? You think about some of those players that were fringe players back in the day. I mean, I shouldn't call them fringe players. I mean, they were very good players, but they had one or two good seasons. Mm-hmm. And Cadillac Williams was one of those guys. And when he was on. He was electric.
Yeah. Not a bad player. He was the fantasy football guy that you thought this is going to be his breakout year. He's going to be my workhorse back, all of that. It kind of never materialized.
I stole him. He's going to have a big year this year. I stole him in the draft. Now that was but when he was playing, that was before they had electric Cadillacs, which I think they actually do have now. Because Scott said he was electric, and so he was the first electric Cadillac.
His battery just didn't last very long in cold weather.
He was ahead of his time. He had to take too much time charging. It's all paid.
So a little bit of Giants history here. 4 years ago today, Eli Manning retired. So if I have to rank my favorite Giants, I still have an affinity for Lawrence Taylor and those 80s Giants. But Eli Manning is a guy, even as a grown-ass adult, I just admire the hell out of the way he played. And someone was posting videos today of him standing in there against San Francisco in the championship game, just taking hit upon hit and still delivering balls. And, we know what he did in the Super Bowls, but the guy just was tough as nails. And when I see the state of quarterbacking in the NFL today, and even with the Giants with Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones is not a durable guy, and Eli Manning, we took that for granted. He would separate a shoulder and come back out the next week and play.
Yeah, Eli, man, he surpassed all the old Giants for me at some point, and ironically, I think it was when he finally made that big leap over LT, because that's the one you got to get over if you're going to be the someone's favorite Giant. To me, it was not the very end of his career, but those middle years in between the end of his career and the 2011 Super Bowl, when he just stayed in there with a terrible team, and like Scott mentioned already, week in, week out, he was constant. And I think that's why so many Giant fans had a problem with him getting benched when he did. Even if you thought he was the reason, he was like putting this record so far out of reach that just do it at the end of a year, start the next guy the next year. It just, speaking of as Novak and I have been talking about, Dable's kind of propensity to make things not about him. To me, that was McAdoo's. That was his, hey, this isn't about me. Eli's not playing well moment, and I'm willing to throw this streak in the garbage to make a point. And the point fell flat on its face. I believe he was replaced with with Geno, right? Geno was the one who played that game.
It was Geno Smith.
It looked awful.
It was against the Raiders,
yep.
in Oakland, and the Giants lost that game. And Geno, I think, had two interceptions. He had one costly interception. I know that. I'm not sure if he had two or he had an interception and a fumble. But
yeah, if we had known what Geno still had in the tank, we wouldn't have had to draft. We wouldn't have had to draft Daniel Jones.
So games this weekend much better than the weekend prior. Couple games went right down to the wire. Buffalo, Kansas City was one of them. And that Buffalo, Kansas City had so much going on. You had Jason Kelsey up in the stands, shirtless, drinking a beer, out in the parking lot, partying with the Bills fans before. You had your Taylor Swift mentions. You had Travis Kelsey scoring a touchdown, doing the heart symbol to Taylor. Wasn't that so touching? And then you had another, I don't want to call it a collapse, but you had another game that the Bills played where Josh Allen, in a big situation and having to make a big drive, took some shots downfield, and one of them probably should have been caught to Diggs, was not caught. But then there were other times he just kept going for the big play when he had stuff underneath that probably could have gotten them closer in field goal range or even gotten them a touchdown. And now we have to start talking about whether did the Bills miss their window? Has the Bills window closed? I mean, it's going to come up here sooner or later because Josh Allen's getting up there a little bit. Is Diggs going to stay around? Gabe Davis was out for that game and arguing with fans on the sidelines, Buffalo fans. And you have to wonder to yourself, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, I kind of have to think that this is, I'm not saying it's the end of their run because you've got a quarterback that's going to be there for 10 more years. But I do think this window is probably closing. Steph Diggs is not a number one receiver anymore. He has clearly lost a step because anytime they were targeting him, it was behind the line of scrimmage or it was just a couple of yards deep. And they did throw the one that he did drop. I cannot blame Josh Allen for this loss at all. He really does not have a ton to work with. On top of the fact that defense was decimated with injuries, and you saw, Kelsey was torching them because they were playing a guy that was on the couch 2 weeks ago in AJ Klein as their middle linebacker, and it's by no, coincidence that Kelsey had his biggest game in probably 10 weeks. And are we not going to talk about and it didn't result in the loss, but that fake punt, I mean, is there a worse call that I've seen in the last 2 years? I think they were up at the time or they were down a score, whatever it was close, and you're on your 40-yard line and you got Patrick Mahomes the other side of the ball and you're going to run Damar Hamlin up the gut on a fake punt? I know there were 10 men on the field. I don't care.
I think they were down 3 at the time, but that's a solid call when you go to the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. He's got to pick that up, doesn't he?
Comeback Player of the Year.
Just to continue, and the coaches have been pretty. We talked about last week. The coaches in the playoffs have controlled themselves a little
They
bit,
have. Mm-hmm.
but it's just this playoff continuation of these terrible decisions that would get you fired in almost any other season, save the last 2 or 3 years here. There's you just can't give another team points. And while you at the same time are giving up points to go for it on fourth down, I mean something's got to give in there. I really do long for someone to come in and set this straight and get this thing figured out, because it just makes me angry, and I hope to think that I would still be angry at the call if they had made it. Because I think I would be, because I know as soon as I saw the ball snap to the up man, my reaction is, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Terrible.
So it's Cardone's not here. Novak did a pretty good job covering that. I think the Bills' injuries played a big role in that game, of course, and 3 of us didn't factor that in. Novak did pick the Chiefs.
Well, what's also funny about that play is, even if you pick it up, so you're doing this. I think they were at their own 28 or so. It was inside their 30. Even if you pick this up, it's not a gimme you're going to go on in that drive and score, even a field goal. I mean, you might go 3 and out from that next set of downs that you have.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. And I think, famously, Bill Parcells told Sean Payton before he coached in the Super Bowl, maybe it was the playoffs at the time, Payton went to him for advice, and Parcells said, all I would say is, you got to coach this game with your balls outside your pants. So, in other words, don't be afraid to take some chances. But I don't think that's what happens here. Chances can still be chances, but at the right time, in the right place, in the right situation. Mm-hmm. And it's not just willy-nilly saying, oh, I remember that advice about, playing balls out here, so let's just fake this. It's got to be more situation driven than just deciding to go for it on 4th and 18, from somewhere. It's the whole game is screwed up. And my only comment about this game, to me, and you mentioned it, but so there was a lot of bad, horrible, awful stuff going on during that game with Taylor Swift and the Hearts and all that. But the MVP of that game to me was Jason Kelce. He made that game tolerable.
He did.
He's drinking cheap beer, shirtless, in the Buffalo Cold. You gotta admire that.
Yeah, it even when they panned the shot that was, just a shot on Taylor Swift, you could see his naked stomach in the background, just slamming beers back there. He must have been toasted, man.
And there was video of him partying before the game with the Bills Mafia guys. So he was just showing up at tailgates. He was drinking. I think he was chugging beer out of a bowling ball at one point. I mean,
he said he had 40 Miller Lights. That's what he said. I love that they panned up there at one point. I don't know if you guys caught it. And on the corner of the screen, Pat Mahomes Sr. was in there. And Jason Kelce's dancing naked or whatever he was, and Taylor Swift, and all the people were screaming. And he looked back at them. I obviously on YouTube is going to be able to see, kind of like, are you kidding me that this is the box that I'm sitting in?
This is where we've come now.
This is where we've come now. It's like a frat party back here. Come on. Yeah. So, I mean, Jason Kelce, I actually like Jason Kelce. I have no problem with him. The Taylor Swift thing's annoying.
I didn't hear the 40 beer reference, but man,
that's what he said.
If I had known that, he was definitely the MVP. That is an MVP performance there.
Absolutely. We need to take a still picture of this today, like where he was last week. And then 3 years from now, when he magically does that retirement loss of 200 pounds and looks like me. Oh, it was just he cut out beer.
He cut it down to 35 a day.
There was a little bit of hijinks in this game as far as the officiating is concerned. There was that critical 3rd down play where the Chiefs did not pick it up, and then inexplicably, without a flag being on the ground, the officials huddled up and decided that the Bills had committed pass interference. And these are the kind of calls that lend everyone to a conspiracy theory. Now, I don't think there's a conspiracy theory here. If there was, they probably would have marked the Chief down when he fumbled out of the end zone. They would have, well, they did mark him down, but they would have said that upon review that he didn't fumble. But I don't understand. I still can't grasp. Like, do you just talk about something and then you can throw a flag retroactively? And one guy is in that huddle, like adamantly saying that he saw something that didn't happen. I don't know how we always talked about this as Giant fans, Mike, when we talked about the bully ref coming in and changing a call. But this seemed almost different. The play was done. The Chiefs were arguing and looking for a flag. 10 seconds later, there's a huddle there and there's a conference going on. And then they decided to drop a flag and then replay showed that they were incorrect, but you can't go back and challenge that.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about the officiating and like I think you said hijinks. That is sort of the best way to describe it at this point. It's game after game. And we see it more in Giants games, so that's why we talk about it in reference to the Giants so much. But that's the beauty of these playoffs. We're seeing the same types of things, and I don't think anyone on this air has ever said it's the Giants or it's the Jets. It's the officiating. It's it is what it is, and things like this. Like if you don't throw the flag and the play ends, and you have decided to keep it in your pocket, bad call or good call, that's over. It's over. And if you think, crap, I missed one there, call it on the next play. Get the makeup call. We've known they've been doing that since the 60s and 70s. So, the makeup call is bad football officiating. We've all become accustomed to. So, if you feel like I might have missed one there, I feel bad about it. Call defensive holding on the next snap. That was dumb. It's completely dumb.
Because where's it going to go? Right. If you're telling me that this is going to happen every now and then, is it going to now be more frequent? Are they going to have to huddle on every single play just to make sure they got it right? Like, where is this going to go? And what's the rhyme or reason as to why that one time they have to have that discussion? I don't understand how that happens. Is it because it's the playoffs? Is it because it's the Chiefs? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it's another play where the ball hadn't gotten to the sticks, wasn't going to make it to the sticks. Team wasn't going to get a first down. The Bills would have been better off had he caught the ball and they just tackled him right there because it wasn't going to be a first down.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead, it's an incomplete pass. They're celebrating, and then the officials huddle up and say, "Oh, wait a minute."
Yeah. Well, I know to Cardone's great point. Whenever there's a call like this, is always that where's the other team like screaming, where's the coach running on the field, where's the call now? The Chiefs themselves on the field did this, which they do after every incomplete pass, where's my call? But there was no, I mean, if they had just incomplete and you guys kick your field goal or punt or whatever, no one would even be talking about that play now. They wouldn't say, remember the missed interference in the second quarter or whatever it was. It was just unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was a good game. Another good game came down to the end. We were wrong in our predictions in terms of the score and also how this game would unfold because we thought the Niners would pull away. But the Green Bay San Francisco game was close throughout. San Francisco may have lost Deebo Samuel. I don't know if they will or not. San Francisco did pull it out at the end. McCaffrey, of course, just is a beast.
He's a beast.
Yeah. And Green Bay, hats off to them. They looked. I didn't give them much credit this year, especially when they lost to the Giants. And I don't think that that's a great team. So I have to look at coaching and say coaching did a good job this year. It's the youngest team in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, you're dead right on all that, Scott. I mean, yeah, they didn't look great at times this season. At times this season, they looked terrible. And I thought everyone's excitement at the end of the season about this improvement, I just didn't really see it that much. I thought they were still a very suspect team, but in the playoffs, when you're as young as Green Bay is, Green Bay fans don't want to hear this, but you can get a moral victory, and you can take a loss that still signals to the rest of the NFL, hey, guess what? Packers are back. And I think that's what they may have done. Now, they may follow the Giants' path next year and fall completely on their face, following up a nice little playoff run. But for now, that's the way it looks.
And yeah, I think you saw in both the Ravens and the 49er game that first bye week hurts that team, I think, because they both looked not great in the first half. I think even though the Ravens ended up blowing out the Texans, by a significant amount, I think it was 10-10 at halftime, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it was close. And you saw the 49ers very rusty against the Packers. And to the Packers' credit, they kept it going in the second half. They didn't fall apart. And honestly, I think the Packers gave away that game.
Yeah.
Not just the last pass by Jordan Love. There are a couple of plays in the second half that they missed. They missed that field goal, first of all, which was a makeable 41-yarder, I want to say, with a rookie kicker, which never go into a playoffs with a rookie kicker, but whatever. And then Jordan Love's that last pass was terrible. He played great the whole game, and he just got spooked or something at the last second and across his body over the middle of the field against a great defense, and that's what lost that team that game. But again, the bye week I think hurts these teams. Just go to eight playoff teams. Just have one versus 8, 2 versus 7. Just can we stop with this already? Let's just get there.
Well,
yeah, they're trying to slow roll this for us, but we know that's where they're going.
Of course they
do
are.
It.
Just do it already.
Stop it.
Have super wild card weekend.
Double super.
Extra super wild card.
So this could have been one of my pet peeves, and Mike, it's a good parallel Mike just drew earlier about the Giants, sort of faltering this year. Will the Packers do that next year? Because I think last year the Giants were one of the youngest teams in the league, and this year the Packers are one of the youngest teams in the league. And what you inevitably hear, and I heard it a couple of times on this weekend, was, well, the Packers are here to stay for the next 8 to 10 years. But the way the contracts work in the NFL, that doesn't happen. I mean, guys age out. Like 4 years from now, you have to re-sign all these guys at the same time. They can't keep Dobbs and Jordan Reed and everyone else together if they're all going to do well. It just doesn't happen. Jordan Love's going to have a contract coming up here in a few years, and all that stuff hits at one time. And it doesn't matter if you're 25 or you're 32 at that point. You're going to demand extra money. So I always bristle when I hear that, because it doesn't ever come true. When's the last time you saw a team that was really young stay together for 5-6 years?
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's a good point.
And it's not, I've said this before on the podcast. I think it's been a while. Maybe not everyone's heard it, but this isn't like the 80s and even some into the 90s where you could see a team coming from 3 seasons away.
Yep.
You could see them every year, incremental improvement, and you just knew they were coming. It's not like that anymore at all. Generally, I know they've tried for parity, but these last few years, it just seems like in the NFL, we're stuck in this, the rich are getting richer mode. The top 4 or 5 teams always seem to be the same. And then these, upstarts pop up every now and then and jump into the picture. But,
Yep. We've talked about it on the pod before, but that the average year sees a half of the teams from the previous year don't make the playoffs the following year. Now you do have that upper tier, the Patriots or whoever it is up there that had been making it for years. And then the backfill of those lower teams, whether it was the Jaguars last year and this year, maybe it's the Texans or it could be like the Dolphins or something like that. There's just seems to be teams that come and go. I think the Packers were one of those. You could add Seattle in there as a replacement for them. It wouldn't have really changed much, I don't think. Vikings, whoever. But that's a good point, a good observation. Speaking of contracts that will be coming up, so in the Detroit-Tampa Bay game, Tampa Bay did lose that, and they gave Detroit a good game. And there were a couple calls in that game that actually probably could have gone Tampa Bay's way that would have changed the outcome there. But now we're looking at Baker Mayfield, who's making $5 million this year, and he could be looking at a Daniel Jones-like contract, $35 to $40 million a year, trying to figure out, does he stay in Tampa Bay or does he go somewhere else? I'm not bought on the idea that Baker Mayfield's resurrected his career. I think. If I'm throwing, I could probably look pretty good throwing to Mike Evans and a couple of the other receivers there. I thought he looked good at times. He looked bad at times, but overall the results were that they got to the second round of the playoffs. So just like the Giants did last year, I mean, you have to look at what Daniel Jones did. Will Baker Mayfield revert once he gets a contract or not? That's one topic. And then the other topic is just talking about the Lions. I mean, the Lions continue to be that story, that Cinderella team. We'll get to our predictions here in a minute against the Niners, but the Lions again, I mean, just living the dream. Goff, to me, looks like he's playing really well. Jahmyr Gibbs has done a ton. I'm impressed that Laporta was able to come back from injury and dominate that game.
Yeah, I thought that was probably the best game of the weekend. I thought. I mean, the Bill Kansas City game was good too, and I think it was better because it was the Bills and the Chiefs. But from the pure football being played, I thought that the Bucks Lions game was fantastic. But we have to talk about those coaching blunders at the end of the game, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen anything like that in the longest time. And yes, people are talking about it, but not enough in my mind. I mean, the Bucks, had they called timeout there with first of all, Campbell didn't tell Goff wait until 1 second left on the play clock to sit on the ball. He sits on it with 16 seconds left. If the Bucks had called timeout, you have 33 seconds. You've got to kick a 47-yard field goal. And if you miss it, you've got 33 seconds to go, 60 yards? You're telling me that can't happen? Of course it can with Mike Evans and a not a great secondary in Detroit. Two horrible coaching blunders that no one's talking about.
Yeah, agreed.
No, good point. Yeah.
Coaches, the coaches used to catch the blame for everything. And when it comes to firing or not firing, they still do. They seem to be the head that's going to roll. But coaches seem to get a pass these days. They just do. And it's sometimes it's more obvious the blunder than the other. But I doubt like very many fans around the league noticed what you did, Novak. I'd say we're probably in the top 2 percentile for people who are talking about that. But yeah, it's significant, and it's giving your team a chance to win a game. And
I mean, do you have a better chance of going 60 yards, 60, let's call it even 65 yards in 30 seconds with no timeouts, or the Music City Miracle? I mean, you got a better chance at 65 yards with 30 seconds left. A game was won on the Music City Miracle, and Bowles' response when they were asked about that, he was like, what are the odds that that's going to happen? Fucking better than a game that was actually a 1 in a million shot.
Who cares what the odds are? They are not zero.
And it's the playoffs. It's not week 5.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Yeah. Well, and your season's over with when you didn't even extend the game as you could have. I always harken back to when the Panthers made their first Super Bowl, and they were talking to random drunk fans afterwards. The news was interviewing people, and they're like, "We're here. We're gonna be back next year. We're gonna be back every year." And I'm like, dude, you don't realize how hard it is to make a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it could be it could be the most minutia of things that cause you not to make a Super Bowl. We just saw here, like you're saying, you could give your team 33 seconds. Now, would Campbell even kick the field goal? I don't know. But if he attempts that field goal and he makes it, all right, things probably don't change. But you at least keep your team alive. And that's what your job as a coach is, to give your team the best opportunity to win.
I think that's the number one job of the NFL coach, is to extend the game, to give your team as many chances as possible.
Totally.
To win the game from that position.
How do you know that's not a high snap over the holder's head and the ball trickles down to the 32-yard line? Yeah. I mean, you have no idea.
I mean, I don't think we've seen it yet in these playoffs, but nearly every year in the playoff, there's at least one like a miracle finish where a team is dead with 5 minutes left and wins the game. Yeah, that happens almost every year. More likely in the wild card round, something like that happens. But yeah, I'm surprised when Todd Bowles asked, what are the odds of that? That one of the reporters didn't say, well, according to AWS, yeah, you had a 3.1% chance to win the game at that time of the game.
Your guys' thoughts on Baker Mayfield?
I agree with what you just said. I mean, Listen, they ran into a Philly team in the first round. They got him at home, and this was a team so hard on the tank, like pretty much nothing we've ever seen from a team that's had 10 wins in week 11. Yeah, so yeah, but you know what? Baker's not playing bad. He's got a decent team around him. He didn't have that a lot in the past. So I think Baker's fine, but there's no resurgence here. He's not doing anything to drop anybody's jaw. I mean, he's still in this very game that we saw, and even against the Eagles, there were plays where you're like, well, Baker's going to be Baker. Baker's going to have those plays in a game, and at some point, it's probably going to cost him. But yeah, I don't buy it. I desperately hope that somebody gives him a Daniel Jones like contract, because that will validate everything we said when Daniel Jones got that contract, was that it doesn't take very long for these contracts that everyone is flipping out about to catch up with the rest of the league, and before you know it, it's a bargain. I think of Eli's big contract. The world went nuts when Eli got $100 million, and within 2 seasons after that, he was probably considered a little underpaid for what he delivered. So, it's all reactive as usual, and yeah, I'm with you, Scott. I don't buy Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers could certainly do worse, and they have played with worse over the years, but there's significantly better quarterbacks out there.
I feel like Baker Mayfield his ceiling is what we saw. This guy is not taking you to the Super Bowl.
Nope.
So they are stuck in no man's land with this guy. I mean, you have to re-sign him because there's not a better option out there right now. But I think, like I said, what we saw is the best he's going to do. And unless other quarterbacks and other teams fall flat in a year and there's injuries but he won 9 games this year in a very bad schedule in a very bad division.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with both of you. I don't see it, but I don't think they have any other option.
I thought it was interesting this year that everyone was like, the resiliency of the Buccaneers to make it to the playoffs and win a playoff game. Any other year, they would be talking about that NFC South winner, whoever it was, whether it was the Bucs or the Saints or Falcons, as like, oh, this team has no chance. And realistically, the Buccaneers had no chance to go any further than they did. Why were they getting like universal praise for winning that division? That division was garbage.
Not only that, Scott, but in past years, as we've seen with the NFC East, there would be reporters writing about, do we need to have division winners in the playoffs, that nobody from that division deserves to go. You didn't hear that this year. There was no, a couple of years ago there when the Giants and the Redskins were going for the NFC East, when what's his name, the coach for Jacksonville now, threw the game, basically kept the Giants out of the playoffs that whole year.
Peterson.
I mean, yeah, Peterson. There was legitimate talk that year, like, should we change how the NFL picks playoff teams? And I didn't hear any of that this year. I mean, the Bucs literally finished third or worse in every other division in football.
Mm-hmm. And if it's not the Baker Mayfield story, then I think the discussion is happening. But because it's, they want so badly for this reclamation, turn their career around kind of story, which is so overplayed and played out.
So the final game of the weekend, I almost led with the audio of this because Novak picked the score exactly. He said the Ravens would win 34-10. The Ravens won, like you mentioned before. They came out a little rusty. CJ Stroud looked decent in the first half, and then the Ravens defense took over. The Raven offense started chewing up clock, and methodically, it was one of the, I don't want to call it less impressive, but it was one of those games where they got to 34-10 at the end. And how did they get to 34? It's just that the Ravens just sort of go up and down the field. They're not flashy. It just, all of a sudden I look up and they've got 34 points on the scoreboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the Ravens, like I said, they started out slow. They are the class of the AFC. We'll get into predictions in a little bit, but please God, let them beat the Chiefs, because that's the only last hope I think we have, because I think the Chiefs get by here, and they get to the Super Bowl. Look out, world, because it's going to be the Taylor Swift Super Bowl.
Now, I do want to go back to the audio from last week. I do believe you said if the Chiefs beat the Bills, then you were going to pick them to beat the Ravens.
I did.
I said that too. I agreed with that statement. But
that might change. Just saying.
Yeah, it didn't quite play out that way, where the Chiefs were the beneficiary of a bunch of bad calls, and
no.
it more played out. The story of that game was more Buffalo than Kansas City. I think Buffalo's propensity to shoot themselves in the foot. So yeah, I might go back against that too. No spoilers for my pick, but
well, we're to the point now where we're going to talk about these next two games. So I'll start first with the Lions and Niners. Breaking that game down, I think this is an interesting game. I mean, winning in San Fran is tough. The Lions traditionally have not been great outside of a dome, but this year seems to be a little bit different. I don't know what to expect in this game. I think Dan Campbell's going to try and pull out all the stops. He's going to go for broke. He's going to rely on that. I mean, he's been doing it all year, but he's going to rely on like sort of that reputation he has. And then we'll see what happens. I do think the 49ers are a better team. So I'm not sure if they're gonna pull this out or not. I'll go to Novak first for his take.
So surprisingly, I'm actually really torn on this one. So I wish I could say there's an if situation here, because if Deebo Samuel does not play, I think that I would take the Lions. So I'm going to make my pick under the assumption he's not playing. So, and here's why. I think that in watching the Packer game, Aaron Jones pretty much ran where he wanted to against the 49ers, and that backfield of Gibbs and Montgomery is pretty freaking good. And then you throw on top of the fact they have, the more I watch the Lions, I realize how many weapons they actually have. Laporta and St. Brown and Reynolds and all these guys. And then, of course, Gibbs and Montgomery, and Goff is steady. I think he's a better quarterback than Brock Purdy right now. And I think Brock Purdy's a little overrated. The Lions defense and secondary worries me. But if Samuel doesn't play, I'm going to pick the Lions to win this game, actually, 28-24.
Mikey.
Yeah, this always happens when Scott goes before I do. He makes me like waver on my my pick a little bit. Now I am going to go with San Francisco here. I just feel like this is their year. Other than that little spurt they had for some reason, like a third of the way into the year, they've been dominant. I think they got this game at home, and I think that's probably the difference. If the Lions have this game at home, I would lean probably more toward the Lions in this. But San Francisco, I think San Francisco's defense can be downright nasty. And I think in the NFC Championship game with the Super Bowl on the line, that's the time usually defense shows up. And I believe that the 49ers are going to pull this out. And I won't say comfortably, because as Novak said, the Lions have a lot of weapons. I think more than people realize, until you sit down and watch a Lions game. You're like, now who's this guy? But yeah, I'm going to take the 49ers, and I'm going to go with a similar score to Novak's, but I'm picking the other team to win. I'm going to say 28-23 San Francisco.
All right. Yeah, for me, when I look at these two games, I think we're going to have a really close contest in both championship games, which means probably they're going to be two blowouts. But when I take a look at it on paper, I see a Lions team, like Novak said, with a lot of weapons, and I also see that 49ers team with a strong defense that at this point in a playoff run, it usually is the defense that starts to take over. And I could see a situation where they start harassing Goff, and Goff maybe makes a few more mistakes than we've seen previously. One thing also that worries me that Novak brought up is that the Lions defense has not been great. It's probably the worst out of the four teams that are left. And so McCaffrey could have a huge day. Kittle could have a huge day, even if Deebo Samuel does not play. I'm not expecting Deebo Samuel to play. And I think this game is going to be close. It'll be a good game. And I think at the end, similar to last week where the 49ers struggled in the first half, and actually, I think they were trailing through the third quarter. and then poured it out at the end. I think you're going to see something similar to that, and they pull a game out at the very end, 27-23.
One thing I want us to all remember and watch for: if this game is close and the Lions have the ball at the end of the game, watch a mistake by Dan Campbell. Something tells me that he has played this riverboat card all year. He's going to get the ball with a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and he's going to get tight and do something stupid. And that's the only reason I wanted to pick the 49ers, because if that transpires, watch a big mistake by Dan Campbell.
Yeah, he's going to do some kind of quarterback throwback thing, and some great
try to get cute and yep.
At best, they'll lose like 16 yards on it if they don't turn it over. I can totally see that.
4th and inches, kick the field goal to tie, or 4th and inches and go for it. He's going to go for it and get something like that.
Yeah.
Now Cardone did give his predictions too. He had 26-20 San Fran over Detroit.
Yep, I got it.
So the second game, I went last again. I'll go first here. Kansas City and Baltimore. I am very torn on this game. I could see a scenario, and I think I texted you guys when the Bills were starting that last drive, and we didn't get to see it happen because Josh Allen threw the interception. But I said if they had gotten, actually they missed the field goal. But or did they get the ball back and then throw an interception, or is that it? Was that the end after the field goal?
The Chiefs got the ball and they stopped. They got a first down. So the Bills never got the ball back.
Yeah, the Bills got the ball back. So I was saying to you guys that I wanted to see the Bills extend that drive, and they were going to have a long completion down to the 10, and then this phantom flag would come out that would push them back because of offensive holding or something. That never materialized. But it'll be interesting to see if this is a close game, Kansas City and Baltimore. If Baltimore somehow gets on the wrong end of a roughing the passer, or whether they get a defensive holding or some call that just is complete bullshit, even though they're going to be playing at home. And that's my only concern with this. Otherwise, I see Lamar Jackson shaking off all the people that have criticized him for his playoff performances. And I see Baltimore as a stronger team defensively winning this game. And I think they're going to hold the Chiefs offense in check. So I see this as a 20-17 win for Baltimore. Another close game. Again, like I said, we're probably going to see 49-14 and the 38-12 or something in these games.
Yeah, Sunday's going to be a fun day. These games are both going to be good. Maya, so the one thing that's caught my attention as the year has kind of wound down here is the Chiefs defense in the media is being talked about like the '85 Bears all of a sudden, and I don't quite get it. The defense has been playing better, but they've had to play better. They've had to play a little bit more of a different game than they've had to play in past years when the Chiefs were scoring 48 points and the defense could take some chances. They're just not taking chances. They're just playing solid, and I do think that helps them. But I'm not like over the moon with the Chiefs defense. That said, I think the Ravens defense is a little overrated this year. I think that they are getting a little bit of love for the uniforms and the past defenses that played in those uniforms. So this is the overrated defense bowl to me. So it's going to be a 7-3 game, right? No, I like the Ravens in this game. I think Lamar Jackson just is the type of player that this Chiefs defense that's playing so solid and so tight does not want to see. He breaks all the rules. He's not where he's supposed to be ever. He throws to people he shouldn't be throwing to. It works out for him. Not to mention, he'll break out of the pocket and go crazy at least twice a game. So I think I think this is a close game throughout. The Ravens kind of pull away a little bit late, and they win this game. Let's go 27-17.
I kind of like that breakdown, Mike. I think similarly, you watch Josh Allen able to run pretty easily against that Chiefs defense, which is a little bit overrated. And you take Josh Allen times 10, and that's Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
So I I think that Lamar Jackson he's got the guy this year that is going to have his year. Like every one of these great quarterbacks has his year. I think this is it for him. I said I was going to take the Chiefs, but I can't pick them because I don't want them. I'm just so sick of them. So I do think the Ravens are going to win this game, and I'm going to say 27-17.
So we're going to have a diversion here because Cardone is going to take the Chiefs 27-23.
Well, good. We've got two different bets finally.
Yeah. Until he listens to the podcast and he's like, why did I pick the Chiefs?
So going into this game, what are the records? Are we all even?
No, man. So Novak caught up with you guys with his Chiefs pick last week. So everyone's 6-4 except for I'm 5-5. So I'm duplicating my regular season performance and I'm bringing up the rear in the playoff performance as well.
So let me say this: if we get to the Super Bowl, who's ever in first place has to pick first, because then I'm going to pick opposite if I'm a game back.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we'll go by record in the to pick for the Super Bowl.
It's like Final Jeopardy. We got to let the people leading go first.
Final Jeopardy, don't they all make their bets in secret?
I guess that's true. So that's a bad correlation.
You need to consult with Aaron Rodgers. He's an expert on Jeopardy.
That's true. That's right.
We could do that. I mean, we could make our picks on paper. They go cost, and Scott could bring it up. Just...
That's what I'm saying. Let's do that.
It'll be like Pat, or what was the one match game? Where they always hold up the card. Yeah. Charles Nelson Riley.
Yeah, man, that show was great.
So just before we came on air tonight, Jim Harbaugh, reports are out there. Fire's going on. He's reportedly the new head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers, or the Clippers, as Cardone calls them.
The Clip. Yeah, it's kind of a sad day for me personally. I mean, I saw this coming, of course, but the whole world saw it coming. Novak and I were talking about it off air that, all the trouble the NCAA's given him, and clearly he's a dude with a target on his back and just won the national championship with his alma mater. I mean, what's left to do? There's a big exodus happening from Michigan. They're not winning the national championship next year. Now hopefully they'll reload and be back decent with a whatever 12 playoff team field. But every sign pointed to. I don't even begrudge the guy. I mean, I liked him. I know Scott didn't. Cost didn't. When he was the coach of the 49ers, I was beyond myself when he went to Michigan. I mean, I was nuts for that. And I never wavered. I have good friends who are Michigan fans who, during the dry years with Ohio State there, were trying to drive the guy out of town, and, he had to take a pay cut to stay. And I never wavered on Jim Harbaugh. I always wanted him there, and I was glad that he stayed when he did. And this just seems like a coronation. What else is left now? So he'll be back to college if he's taking the Charger job, probably, because if that's a horribly run organization, in my opinion. But I don't know if he'll be back to college. Maybe he'll jump to another NFL team. But adios, Jim. It was awesome.
We've talked about this before with guys like Harbaugh, and my only bone of contention with him is just that his act wears thin when you're not winning. Look, he took the 49ers to success and had that team doing well. And then the one year he doesn't do so well, and the Kaepernick stuff blows up and everything else, and all of a sudden he leaves, and he's gone. And it's funny. Video surfaced this week about his exchange with Jim Schwartz going off the field, where he gives him the back slap and Schwartz chases him out of the arena. But that kind of stuff we talked about before, like with Rex Ryan. We've alluded to it with Nick Sirianni. When you have a style like this, your career lifespan in the NFL is very short. Now, I would have thought he would have just stayed at college and been one of those guys that retires in college and puts together a 25, 30-year career and rides off into the sunset. So I was a little bit surprised at this.
Yeah, I had hoped that.
I'm I do root for Michigan as well. Not like Mike, but I have always rooted for Michigan. Um, we're going to find out once and for all if Justin Herbert's a player. And so that's the only reason I'm a little not excited. I'm like interested to see what happens here because all we've heard about this guy for the last 5 years is how great and how talented he is, and he's an elite quarterback. But yet they suck every single year. Now I do think that coach is a doofus, Staley. So, but he's run out of excuses now. If Harbaugh can't turn him into something, then this guy is going to go in that long list of quarterbacks that are overrated just because of an arm talent or something else. So that's the one reason I'm excited about it. Sadly, it's in the AFC, and I don't need any more competition in the AFC. So that part sucks, candidly.
I always thought if Harbaugh came back, he was going to go into a conference different from where his brother's coaching, but I guess not. Different division. Mike, you got any pet peeves tonight?
That's a good point. Yeah, you would think he'd want this to preserve that matchup for a Super Bowl, right? But it's a good point. Yeah, my pet peeves is something that it's probably been a pet peeve by someone before, but it really, really struck me this weekend watching these games. And it's not just because they're playoffs, although it's amplified because they were the playoffs, but the presentation of every network for these games is so gutter compared to what it used to be. I mean, the entire so some of the theme music I guess is all right, but everything that happens after that is terrible. Just we've talked ad nauseum about how there's no original thoughts in the booth and they just repeat the same talking points no matter what they see going on in the field. And I think it's NBC who always has to have the stupid, like if it's the Buccaneers playing, they do a little graphic with a pirate ship sinking and, or something, and it's got the stats on the side of it. And I can't take that anymore. I mean, what is wrong with just remember the player, like he'd be on the field, like either standing there or jogging in or out of the huddle, and they put his stats up on the screen in front of him, or they'd say, 7 of 8 this last drive, or it's been 3 weeks since he's thrown an interception. But no, we have to have now the graphic, where there's a lion in a cage and, some other, a monkey over him throwing balls and half of them go in the bucket, whatever. It's just, I can't stand that part of it. And Tirico absolutely seems to love it. I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed, but he laughs his way through every one of those when he's talking about it. And it's just, oh, look at it. We got our graphic here. And no, nobody needs that. Nobody cares about that. I mean, even if you assume that appeals to nobody, even if you try to say we're trying to hit a different audience or we want more females watching, or that garbage appeals to no one. And, it's sort of the old Jerry Seinfeld joke. Like some people had to get in a room and show other people this idea. And everyone was like, yeah, let's look at this. Let's do it. No, don't change the graphics at all. Leave these cheesy PowerPoint things here. This looks great. I just can't believe that, especially in the playoffs. You'd think maybe they tighten some things up for the playoffs. And, the biggest change during the game, when Madden was calling games is he'd get real excited during the playoffs because they had the bunting. They'd have, teams would have the bunting on the walls and bad. Oh, I love these games with the bunting. That would be you could tell you were watching a playoff game because the bunting was out there. But no, now we are subjected to this garbage, which is just another thing in this long continuation of we cannot figure out what's going on with the NFL, the people who officiate it, the people who broadcast it, and the networks who apparently do not give a crap what the people watching it think, so much so that they put it on a station that nobody has, and they laugh at us, while they're doing it.
Well, and I know we've complained about, announcers throughout the time on this podcast, but, I see Greg Olson now as a lead announcer on Fox, and then you have Romo on CBS, and every game now, Romo makes one huge error during the game. Whether it's like, oh, that's definitely a first down, and everyone else in the world is going, well, what are you looking at right there? And then he backtracks from it. And then Greg Olson seems to have an observation or two every week that seems to just be either Captain Obvious, like, Dan Dierdorf, we always call him Captain Obvious, or it'll just be like something that's completely wrong. And yet these guys are at the top of their profession. I just don't get it. To your point, Mike, the production value is one thing with the stats, but even the commentary, to me, the commentary has taken a back seat because everyone wants to make a name rather than just be Summerall and Madden and call the game.
Mm-hmm. And Romo, for again, a reference referred to Jason Kelce as Taylor Swift's brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, he did.
Wasn't that it was? And it was like Twitter's a buzz over the reference to being the brother-in-law. Give me a break.
I mean, has anyone not gotten to Romo that America is over the Taylor Swift thing?
Seriously.
that it's not cute, that it's not, that it's not funny. It's I want one full game. This is what I'll know the NFL is paying attention. One full game with 2 shots or less of her in the box and nobody talking about it.
Yep.
Nobody even mentioning it.
Even Swifties are going, God, I got to watch another damn football game.
Yeah,
I mean, can they just lose already and be done with this?
Yeah. We're tired of Taylor. They're tired of the NFL. Let's end it. This is a bad relationship.
Novak, pet peeve?
2 quick ones. So the first one is the worst rule in all of professional sports, which we saw in the Buffalo Kansas City game, which is the fumble through the end zone that the defense gets on the 20-yard line going in the other direction. I don't understand it. It's got to be fixed. It makes 0 sense to me. I can understand penalizing the offensive team for having done that and them getting the ball on the 20-yard line. It should not be a turnover. What's the difference if that ball is fumbled out of bounds on the 41? You just get the ball on the 41. Like what? It's the dumbest rule in all of sports to me. So I want that to be over. The second pet peeve is more along the lines of what Mike was saying, but I'm going to not the overproduction. It's the underproduction. And we've talked about it before of these god awful sideline reporters. And this question, I'm getting very granular here. At the end of a game, when they have to say, how great is this that you look at this crowd? How good do you feel? What are these guys going to say? What can you give them a more softball question than just tell me how great you feel? And they get one chance with this guy, and that's the question they're going to ask?
That's the question.
And it's every single time. How good does it feel to win in front of these fans? Well, it's actually really shitty because I hate these people because they're yelling at me, every other game that I've lost. So screw them. We're actually winning. What are they going to say? I don't know.
I've really grown to despise Tracy Wolfson. She comes up with the worst questions. She gives the worst reports. I don't know what her worth is.
And she's got the most annoying voice on the planet. That high squeaky voice. Like it's just,
the whole group of the sideline reporters, Scott, you just said they come up with the worst questions. They only ask about 4. The whole group of them have 4 questions combined.
Right.
That they, and when they try to sound like they know something about the game, they'll reference a play or a set of downs or something. They'll go, walk me through that.
Yeah.
You have it on tape. Like, what do you want me to walk you through about that? I don't understand what you mean, and they never actually do walk them through everything. They just sort of say, yeah, that was a fortunate play drive for us. And we kind of caught them on that blitz. But there's no walkthrough that, even the nicest players, if I got that question, I would answer another question. I would just be like, yeah, it feels good to win. Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah.
I don't.
How great would it have been if she gets Jared Goff at the end of that game and she goes, you were a throw-in in a trade to get you out of Los Angeles. You've now won this game. How does it feel? Like, let him respond to that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear that response.
Yeah.
Let's say, F you, LA. Look at me. I'm in the NFC Championship and I beat you, and now I've just beaten another team.
I don't know if we mentioned this on last week's pod or if it was just you and I texting, Novak, but that question Wolfson asked at the end of the Bills game last week, where So what TD was better, Josh Allen, yours or Shakir's?
Yes, right.
Like, what is the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills going to say in that situation? You know what? My touchdown was better. Shakir sucked, man.
That's right.
I am
We
the
did say
man.
about that.
I am the man.
That was the question. How could you even ask that question? I mean, come on.
The uselessness of them, it just becomes more and more apparent every week. Just they add nothing. Nothing.
Now I am going to be contrarian here, though, on the penalty, because
Oh,
I am so upset with how slanted everything is in the NFL to the offense that this is the one bastion for the defense to actually hold out hope for. And I saw a good, actually, Devin McCourty gave a good explanation on why he likes this rule.
I did see that. Yep.
He said because you're taught from Pee Wee football on, don't extend the ball to the goal line unless you're sure you're going to score. If you do extend it to the goal line, you have a good chance of it getting batted out of your hands if you're not already there. And he said that's the one thing that the defenses still have is that they make a play down there, they knock the ball out, the ball goes out of the end zone, they get the ball back. And they said otherwise, what would the rule have to be? I mean, either way, it's sort of stupid. If you fumble it out of the end zone, all of a sudden you get it back at the 20. Well, how does that make any more sense? You can't give it to him at the 1. That really doesn't seem right either. So there's really not a good ruling there that's going to appease everyone. And I thought his explanation was good on that. And to me, if the rules weren't so slanted to the offense, I might be okay with saying, hey, guys, this rule sucks. But it's almost like me sticking my thumb up and saying, hey, you guys have screwed the defenses over and over again. I sort of like the way it is.
Yeah, I'm on both sides of this issue. I mean, I understand the point about, if you fumble in the field of play and it goes out of bounds, by the end zone rule, shouldn't the defense get the ball? If you're assuming that the ball going out of bounds is a recovery by the defense in the end zone, which is what the assumption is being made there is, then why is it just the end zone? And I guess you apply touchback rules to it. I mean, I do. I kind of get that part of it. But the other side of me really does agree with Scott. I don't think there's a good Scott Cost. I'm sorry. I don't think there's a good alternate rule here. The only way I can see giving it back to the defense is let's say you do that and it's 3rd and goal, and you're running that play from the 1 or from the 3, and that happens. Then you almost make it like a penalty, and you say, okay, 10 yards back, loss of down, but it's still offense's ball because there was no recovery of the ball.
That's
so I could see something like that making sense, but to Cost point, I don't want to take another thing away from the defense here. I mean, it's hard enough on them already. This is the one rule that kind of doesn't make sense in their favor, when all the other ones go to the offensive side. So, if they change the rule for next year to be that, if the offense fumbles into the end zone and it goes out of bounds either on the sideline or straight back, that it's a 10-yard penalty from the spot of the last play and loss of down. And then, if it's 3rd down, you got to kick a field goal. Or if you're Dan Campbell, you can go for it if you want.
What they've been talking about is moving it to the 20, which to me makes the least amount of sense because that's really just a touchback in the opposite direction. I don't understand why you take it to the 20 rather than, like you're saying, apply a penalty to it, almost like a intentional grounding, loss of down,
15 yards, loss of down, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I know every time it happens, I mean, it's not long till Twitter starts blowing up with, it's time to change the dumbest rule in football. That my Twitter feed just gets flooded with that every time it happens. So I'm like, all right, we'll propose another rule like Novak did that we that try to get some people behind, because the NFL's not afraid to change these things.
This one will be addressed in the offseason. That's my
opinion.
Yeah, because the Bills Chiefs, the 13-second game when they went to overtime and the Bills didn't get the ball back, that was changed, right? So in the playoffs, both team gets to possess the ball regardless if it's touchdown or field goal.
Dean Blandino already came out and said that they will be looking at this. Yeah.
Okay.
So
great. So they're gonna have a rule change. So we have to have a graphic come up on the screen every time it happens. Now here's the rules. Here's the new rule.
Oh, God.
So my pet peeve's going off the football field. It's that time of year again when baseball has decided who the Hall of Fame inductees are going to be.
Oh, yeah.
And we complained about David Ortiz last year being in first ballot versus a guy like A-Rod or anyone else that was an actual steroid user getting barred. Well, Ortiz always claimed he wasn't a steroid user, even though he used steroids. He still got in for being big and cuddly. Well, this year, Joe Mauer got in on a first ballot. Now, Joe Mauer, his stats are not all that impressive, but here's what makes me the most angry. One of my favorite Yankees growing up, and I wish Cardone was on this podcast because Cardone's a huge Yankee fan too. But my favorite Yankee was Don Mattingly. And Don Mattingly always had that stigma with the Hall. He didn't play long enough at his peak. He can't be a Hall of Famer. He wasn't long enough. He didn't play long enough. He didn't have a sustained amount of stats. If you look at Don Mattingly versus Joe Mauer, in 80 less games, Don Mattingly has more hits. He has 80 more home runs, 150 more RBIs, and he was a 9-time Gold Glove winner to Joe Mauer's 3-time Gold Glove winner. So Joe Mauer is really making the Hall of Fame on reduced stats just on the fact that he's a catcher. And it pisses me off that there are people, and this goes to the degradation, too, of the sports writing community, because so many of these guys are schmucks. They really don't know what they're talking about anymore. And yet they have power to elect a guy like Joe Mauer on the first ballot. So Joe Mauer's getting it on a first ballot, similar to like Mariano Rivera did.
Yeah.
It used to be, the first ballot used to be reserved for superstars.
I mean, forget even statistics for 1 second and ask any relatively knowledgeable baseball fan, pick one of these 4 players to play for your team. Don Mattingly, Joe Mauer, wasn't it Adrian Beltre got in?
Beltre got in.
And Todd Helton. Pick one. Yeah. And I hate the Yankees. And of course I would take Don Mattingly in that group of 4. And those 3 guys are in the Hall of Fame on first. I think they're all first ballots, aren't they?
I'm not sure if they're all first ballots.
Todd Helton might
possible.
not be, but it might be. But I mean, come on.
But a guy like I'll give you another guy out there who's not, well, he was a Yankee for a brief period of time, but not really for most of his career. Gary Sheffield. Gary Sheffield had ton better numbers than some of these guys are getting in right now.
And longevity.
Too. Yeah.
Dude played forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my dad would say about Mattingly was my dad's favorite Yankee as well, and he would say in the early years of Mattingly not getting in that his biggest sin was being a Yankee. And I laughed at that when he said it, but as the years have gone on now here, and I've seen some of these other people get in, there might be something to that. I have a feeling if Don Mattingly with identical career numbers identical career numbers that he has now played his career at first base for the Padres, he might be in.
You might be right, but I mean, Adrian Beltre, I mean, he was a good player. I was shocked he was in the Hall of Fame. Mauer not as much as you say, Scott, only because I think the catching thing helped him. But Beltre, I was surprised by that.
Yeah, and the only reason I drew the parallel to Mauer is because the stats are so similar.
So similar,
yeah. And you're looking at a guy like Mattingly, who also, I mean, people forget Mauer changed positions too. Mauer finished his career at first base.
Mm-hmm.
Mattingly started in a different place. He finished his career at first base. So it just seems to be random who these writers get behind. It still pisses me off to this day that David Ortiz is not held accountable for being a steroid user, while you have guys like A-Rod, Clemens, Bonds, guys that are iconic players in Major League Baseball have that held against them. Once you let Ortiz in, that should have opened the floodgates for everyone else. And it's a travesty that fat fuck is in and everyone else is sitting on the outside.
The Baseball Hall of Fame is too old. There are too many people in it, and it's gotten out of hand. They need to flip a reset switch on that and just say, okay, we're going to have a little bit of higher standards to get in. Not that Mauer doesn't deserve to be in, but first ballot. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. You're right, Scott. First ballot was a huge deal.
Yep.
Not even 15, 20 years ago. And now they just like pick everybody. I always say with the world, everyone's too nice.
Yep.
And you could have even argued back in the day, that the first ballot people were being a little bit snotty because he can't get it in the first year, but we'll throw our support behind him next year.
Yeah, but he's not a first year guy. Yeah. Now
but at least there was that discussion when guys like Adrian Beltre are getting in and Joe Mauer on first ballots. That's tough.
And this doesn't mean what it used to.
I saw Billy Wagner missed by like 4 votes. Billy Wagner? I mean, he was okay. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a controversy about that. Like how Wagner, should be in. Should he really?
Should he really? No.
Yeah, it's too many people in that Hall of Fame, man. It's been going on too long.
Yep.
So we do have one question this week. It's from our buddy Peacock. If you wouldn't have guessed who would have sent a question in,
you might want to start a segment.
The Peacock.
The Peacock segment. I mean,
we should have him come in live to talk about that.
Yeah, we should have him bring him in and ask his question live. He'd love it.
We'd have him like Mike showed up late from darts the other week. We'll have just Peacock just helicopter in for the last segment.
I thought we might have Novak as a coming in hot entrance.
Oh,
this week,
I was very close to that happening, so you know.
So Peacock asks if we're buying a franchise today to get to a Super Bowl quickly, are we buying the Jets, the Giants, or the Cowboys? And who is the closest to winning that Super Bowl?
That is a great question.
It is a very good question. I think it is because
that's one of his best ones this year.
Because there are a lot of things there. I think a lot of people would say, well, Cowboys clearly just based on this year alone, but I don't know if they're that close right now. So I'll kick this to Mike first.
Yeah, clearly this is a thinly veiled way to just say the Cowboys are closer to a Super Bowl than either of your guys' teams. I know the way this guy operates. So, yeah. But now, if I'm going to answer that question honestly, which I always want to do and try to do, I think the Giants are the furthest away out of those three. And I agree that it's not as cut and dry between the Jets and the Cowboys as Peacock maybe wants us to answer on this. If my whole goal in purchasing a franchise was to win a Super Bowl, I would pick the Cowboys right now by a little bit. And my reasoning is because I think the reason they haven't and they don't is because their owner has, as we talked about last week, their owner has built a false culture with no base. They have no reason to act the way they do and the players to think that being a Cowboy is special somehow. I would erase all of that on day one. I would say, listen, screw this. This is not our standard. We're going to try really hard to make it our standard, but you guys aren't special. I can go get 4 free agents today to replace my 4 best players. And that's I think that sort of culture change would help the Cowboys. And I think that their talent level with Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb, I mean, they've and an great offensive line. I think they are built to win now. I hope that this continued culture of them thinking they're somehow the anointed gods of the NFL is going to continue to hurt them. So I take the Cowboys and try to erase that culture.
Novak?
This might shock you. Giants, I would agree with Mike, are the third. Only because if we're talking about quickest, I think that was the qualifier in this, right?
Yeah,
if we're talking long term, I would take the Giants 1. But because of the Daboll Shane regime that you've got going on. If we're talking next year, I actually would take the Jets. And here's why. Because the Jets are an unknown. We don't know what they are with Rodgers. I'm not saying Rodgers is going to be great. I'm not saying he's going to be terrible, but we don't know. We have no answer to what they're going to be. And if they add a couple of pieces offensively and that defense stays, I think they have a better chance because you know what the Cowboys are? They're losers that can't get past the first round of the playoffs. And we've seen it time and time and time again. We know who the Cowboys are. We don't know what the Jets are. So I'm taking the Jets.
Yeah, this one's a tough one for me because I would also lean towards the Jets, except for the fact that if I'm trying to win quickly, it is damn tough in the AFC to see a path for the Jets to even win their own division, let alone move forward fast enough to win a Super Bowl, because you have the Bills in front of you, you have the Dolphins that have been competitive, then you have to go over to the other side where you have the Chiefs. Does Harbaugh make the Chargers competitive? You have the Ravens. The AFC just seems loaded to me. What I would say about the Cowboys is I think we're going to see this with the Cowboys this coming year. Their window may be shut if it's not already closing really quickly. They have a lot of guys they have to extend or make decisions on, and I don't know if they're sustainable enough to have enough pieces there to actually move forward in the NFC and win. But I can't take the Giants. I don't necessarily agree the Giants are third out of the three, because we saw last year that they, had a strong core. They made the playoffs. I think they have a young team. That the problem we have right now is we don't have that franchise quarterback. Whether, if Daniel Jones is healthy, maybe he is, but I don't look at Daniel Jones as being healthy right now. So it's going to take some time to get that most important cog in place. So if I had to answer the question, I'm taking a long time here to answer this, but I might have to agree with Novak with the Jets, just ignore the fact that the AFC is so strong because they have Rodgers. I know the Cowboys have Dak, but the Cowboys have had Dak for how long? And the guys he has how many playoff wins?
Oh, I'm replacing Dak and McCarthy immediately. Immediately. And if I were owning the Cowboys right now, I would have thrown gigantic piles of money at Jim Harbaugh. So that's what I would have done.
But if you look at the Jets too, I mean Novak has to come to this realization after this year. You really have Rodgers for one more year, and then you have to make it. Well, you have to make a decision on that. That's the thing.
Yeah, I know.
After this year, you have to make a decision. Does he actually ever come back and play with the rehabbed Achilles? And if so, is there any limitations there? All of this is unknown.
Yeah, I don't know what the financial impact would be, but if I were to pick the Jets and go with the Jets, I probably cut bait on Rodgers. Mm-hmm. Just because, and only if I have, like we talk about all the time, only if I have someone else in mind. Not just going to cut him as a statement cut or anything like that. But, I'm, as you guys know, as I've said before, I think Rodgers was in a pretty steady decline in his last year and a half at Green Bay. And, I do think he was probably good enough to make the Jets a solid playoff team. But now a year out, recovering from an Achilles and coming back, I don't know. I don't know what I'd be getting there. Buyer beware.
That's fair. But I think if you asked the question and said in the next 5 years, I would take the Giants, and it wouldn't be close.
Really?
Over the other two, yes, because of the regime you have in place.
The Giants need to figure out the quarterback situation.
Definitely, I totally understand that, but I would say, you get a rookie quarterback, you know how this works, and they sit for a year or two. You got them under rookie quarterback salary, and you make a run. I would say the Giants in the next 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years, it kind of changes my outlook on that as well. I think over 5 years, I would take the Cowboys last.
Yes, agreed. Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
because I do think that their window is closing rapidly, if it's not closed. But I think I would take the Jets for 5 years, because I think that's a more sustainable thing. Assuming, I don't know the cap implications of everybody Novak, but assuming you can keep that defense together for most of that time, and I could get a quarterback in there I could rely on, I would think, I think I would go Jets over the Giants. I need to see the Giants do something that makes me think that they're on the track. I agree that I think Dable and Shane, and I think they are on the cusp of building something that's going to be pretty awesome. But even in the next 5 year window, I think I might go Jets.
You know what just came to me is Cardone's not part of this podcast tonight, because he's feeling under the weather. If I hadn't called David Ortiz a fat fuck, we might have gotten away with not having any explicit words at all in this whole podcast.
Pretty funny.
Our first PG podcast.
It could have been a PG podcast. And
Other than the first one.
That fat guy screwed it up.
Other than the very first one, which was probably G.
Unless he got his ass shot in the Dominican Republic, it would have been fine.
Is that where he's been?
I think he's in the Dominican Republic.
Ortiz. I thought you were talking about Cardone.
Yeah, I did too. Where's he going?
Cardone's in the DR, man.
What did he pick up there? You got something?
I think Cardone's just under the weather.
Did he just say a couple weeks ago that he was going to move? Oh, that was if the Giants signed Justin Fields. He's going to move to the DR.
You guys got anything else tonight?
No,
I don't think so.
All right, so we'll be back next week. We'll go over the championship game outcomes, and from there we'll give our Super Bowl predictions, and pretty much hopefully we'll have two good games to talk about. And I'm sure out of these two games we'll probably still have an hour worth of content, if not more. Somehow we have gone about an hour and a half again, but
yeah. Well, they're good games. Good playoff games this past week, and I think these two. I'm really looking forward to Sunday. These are going to be two really good games.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think as we go along on the weeks, we see the uselessness of Super Wild Card Weekend because the games just get worse and worse.
Yep.
So we have been the Three Angry Giant fans. We are minus Cardone, but it's been your host Scott, Giant Mike, and Jets fan Novak. Hit us up on Twitter at angry_3, and as always, we'll see you guys next week. So take care.
See ya.